Welcome to another episode of Wood Couture podcast. I am Filippo Sona, the host of this show. To date, we have interviewed dozens of interior designer, hotel operator, and developer. But till today, we never had people like Richard Wilson, the guy at the center of the material world, a person that speaks with every interior designer, every material manufacturer, and above all, knows all about material. Dear Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Filippo, for having me.
For the people that don't know you, who is Richard?
Well, I'm a born and bred Dubai kid, third culture, lived in the UK, studied in Australia, come back to Dubai. This is home. Been involved in multiple industries, from PR, marketing, from publishing, and now with Colab, which is, as you said, the only material library in the region.
Obviously, you are an entrepreneur because I know you manage and own and still doing that with many businesses. But at what point in your journey, in all your travel, have you came to your mind to create a social enterprise like your material library? You know, what sparkled in you that you decided to do this?
Well, again, Dubai is a growing city. It's a designer's heaven, okay? And there was a need for a space, for an unbiased, independent platform where designers could come in and explore, whether you talk about designers, you talk about manufacturers, contractors, they want to explore new materials that aren't necessarily being specified, or materials that are at the cutting edge of development. And if there's a space or a city where they could be specified, where they could be piloted, I think Dubai is the perfect place. And that was the inspiration for Colab.
If it wasn't Dubai, where would that be?
That's an interesting question. But I think it exists in other places. There are material libraries in London, there are material libraries in Australia, in other parts of the world, in Tokyo, in Japan, in the Far East, in America. But I think we've looked at those and we've tried to create a hybrid mix of a social business venture, a business that still needs to generate some revenue, but a business that has a greater purpose in terms of inspiring the next generation of designers.
Why not a business and a social enterprise?
Well, because at some point, having been in Dubai for over 35 years, you also feel that you want to give back. I might not necessarily want to volunteer my time towards some charitable efforts. I might not necessarily have the time to do that. But am I passionate about materials? Can I combine my passion with an industry that I love, that I'm not from, but I deeply love, the design and build industry? And therein lied the opportunity to say, let's try and give this a go and try and give back to this industry.
It's interesting, when we were chatting before, you told me, I've not studied design, but somehow I'm in love with this industry. What is that drives you to love this industry that you're so passionate about?
Well, for me, again, like I said, yes, I'm not a trained architect or an interior designer. For me, design is something that solves a challenge or a problem. Okay, good design, something that solves a problem or a challenge. And I think with designers having the ability to create and see their visions come to life, that must be so fulfilling. I'm sure they're pulling their hair out during the process. But when you look at a concept, so when you look sometimes at initial drawings and then you see the final end result, I think that must be so satisfying. And I love that.
Do you consider yourself an artist?
I'm a creative person. So I do have a musical background. So that is my first love, music. And from therein stems some of the other creative pursuits that I might take up.
So it's quite interesting because, you say music background, then obviously you have a creative side. You're only missing really your certificate in design, and then and you are complete, because a lot of the interior designers we interviewed, some feel very close to art, some feel very close to, just pure design, materials and construction. Some others, they are there by default. They didn't even study themselves, To me, I was reading a lot about you, and you said, obviously for you, material is very important. You're almost obsessed with material. Why that obsession? Again, material is. Is it the same obsession in any other in your day life? What you buy or what you eat?
100%. So I think that leads to a very important question. For instance, we buy cars, we buy phones, we buy computers. What drives those decisions, the purchasing decision? Is it the brand? Is it the build quality? Is it how long they last? Is it sustainability? Is it so many different factors? Okay, with architects, with interior designers, I think if they understand the materials that they're working with better, they could elevate the end result of what they're building to a far greater degree. And it might come down, yes, there is that conversation where the client's not willing to pay the budget for a certain material. Okay, but I still believe, I remain an eternal optimist, that if a designer understands the simplicity and the beauty of materials that are now emerging, that are being created from so many different emerging studios all over the world, they will be able to convince their clients, they will be able to convince their end users that we should go for a better suited material as opposed to what's been the traditional way of doing things.
I perceive like there is an issue, and that people don't understand. Not everybody, we can't generalize, but we say there is a group of people that do not understand material. And where do you think the issue is in the wider industry? Why people do not understand material?
I think it's across the entire industry. So there's pressure on suppliers to deliver, there's pressure on contractors to deliver, there's pressure on the designers to deliver. Clients want things done yesterday, okay? And so sometimes within this process, we can't point the finger at any one party, okay? At some point, I think people need to take a step back and just understand, investigate, are these materials that we're building with local to a certain region? Are they locally available? What's the carbon footprint of them? Are they good for the overall build of the project? Are they going to last in the environment that we're building the project? So I think we just got caught up, or the entire industry just got caught up in design, build, deliver, handover. Design, build, deliver, handover. Okay? And so as a result, they lost the desire to explore a little bit more, to look outside of the comfort zone also. Okay, I think a lot of people got very comfortable talking to the same suppliers, specifying the same materials, and so the built landscape you can take an example of Dubai, looks very similar. Interiors here start to look very, very similar. Okay, yes, you change the color of a wall or you change the pattern, okay, but the material that they're using, very similar. And do we blame the designers? Do we blame the suppliers? Do we blame what's available in the market? Okay, no, we're not trying to blame. We're saying, guys, here is an avenue where you can explore this. And should you want to then specify, we're here to help you.
So are you trying to educate the entire ecosystem?
We're trying to educate, we're trying to inspire, okay? We want to try and build a community of people who believe, and this is something that I personally believe as well, that learning is something that never stops. I'm learning from my nephews and nieces who are 9 and 10. I'm learning from interns that I hire for Colab who are just coming out of university. We're learning from older people as well. So it's not something that we should put a stop to.
Right. And talking of coming out of the comfort zone, talking about investigate what is out there. You are a man that, as in business we're saying, you can really put the money where your mouth is, because what we have here on the table is 3 very true example of if somebody commit, go and look, is they can find material which is unbelievable. And I want to start with this one, which is, no, actually, I'm going to start with this one, which is, this is, if I understand correct your explanation, and I'll let you describe it, but I go straight to the point and you come into that, what it can be used for. This is made from fish scales.
Yep.
So it's for me, it's a tile, at first, but So what do you use this for?
So basically, this is coming from France. It's a panel product. So it comes in panels. You can use it for countertops. You can use it for wall cladding. You can use it as an accent material. It's exclusively made from fish scales. So it's 100% recyclable, sustainable. And what they've done with this is they've seen there was an element of waste. In fact, all three of these. And I think that should be the future of how materials are going to develop, because there's a lot of waste. And if we can upcycle that waste and create something good out of that, and that's exactly what they've done with this. It's extremely beautiful. Okay, it can be used as a decorative, so it's not something that you would hide. You would not make the carcass of a sofa with it. Yes, you could. You could make the inside of this sofa, the frame, with this, but that would be a waste of this material. And that's something that we also want to try and inspire, that you could have a sustainable material, but if you use it irresponsibly, that's not a good thing. Okay, we want to try and get designers. We're not saying we have the answers, absolutely not. But we can point people in the right direction. We can make that connection with suppliers, with these material studios who are developing materials. And again, I firmly believe Dubai is a design hub, it's a center. So this is where we have the opportunity to really try and make a difference.
So from fish scale, then we're moving on to another material, which is, I was amazed, leather made from coconut shells.
No, actually leather made from coconut water.
Water, even better.
Yes.
From coconut water, we can make leather. So again, this can be used for upholstery, can be used for...
It can be used for upholstery, it can be used for handmade leather goods. Again, this is a similar story in that there's a manufacturing plant where they only have the use for the coconut shells and the flesh. They had no use for the water. They were literally throwing it out. And they found, as a result of throwing it out, that the entire field that they threw this water into was barren, as a result of the water being acidic in principle. And so these two innovators, the entrepreneurs, young kids came along, said, what are you doing with this coconut water? We're going to collect it. They cultured some bacteria on it, and they created this material, which now has won several circular design awards. It isn't still a commercially feasible project, okay, because they're reliant on waste. Right. Okay, they're not actively looking to generate coconut water waste. They can only produce how much water they get, which is also, I think, a responsible way of production.
So is there a limitation on colors or?
No, no, it could be bespoke, it could be colored, you can get textures, you could emboss on this, and they keep researching. They're developing the material, they're fine-tuning it.
And last but not least, which I would say this is to unlock the Da Vinci Code, this is the, the holy grail of really material. This is a tile made of what?
Air pollution.
This is unbelievable. This is hard to believe, you know, with, for ignorant like me, you know, it's just air pollution. But what can we do with this?
Oh, I mean, look, as you said, okay, when I first found out about this material, it's the same thing. This is probably the most satisfying element of what I do with Colab. Coming up and coming on these new materials, things that are being developed. These guys are a small startup based in India, and they found a way to extract air pollution. Okay, so not only are they taking, cleaning the atmosphere, that's number one, but they're taking pollution, which is a waste or a negative, and they're creating something positive out of this. And this is just one commercial application of the technology. The technology could actually create a material that we can build structural projects and buildings with. So, of course, to develop that, it needs government and legislation at the highest level support. But I think designers have to be the ones looking at this material and saying, can we design something? Can we design a pavilion? Can we design an installation? Can we design a pop-up? Which then points the way forward. Okay, but as a material, this is, as you said, a remarkable step. But again, it's only the tip of the iceberg with what they're doing.
So, is it fair to say that you've got big billionaires that spend money to go to space, when if we invest so much less, 10 times less what they're spending in space exploration, this, it become even 10 times bigger business, because you can build an entire city which is completely sustainable, made out of what the other pollute, we're going to recycle and make a business. So it can be a huge business. So sustainability is not necessarily costly. Sustainability can be producing huge returns. The example is here.
It's the only way forward. Okay, we've had this conversation, and I've had it multiple times with architects, with designers, with contractors, with clients, and they say sustainability costs. And to which I say, you're not looking at the value, the long-term value of sustainability. If everyone accepts that and embraces that sustainable living, sustainable building is the only way forward, it becomes the norm rather than the exception. But of course, as you said, it needs the big boys to see the potential. At the present moment, they're not looking at it they don't see the profit perhaps in it. But if governments start legislating and pointing ways that this is the only way we need to do it, this is the only way that's acceptable, perhaps we will still be able to save the planet.
So talking of sustainability, I was shocked. We've been doing several episodes of Wood Couture podcast, and interviewing people at the forefront of interior design, working on global projects. And I was shocked by the fact that some of them say, in the last 2 years, I never had a client ask me to incorporate sustainability in the design. So my question to you is, now, has the design, there's some industry done very well in progressing the subject of sustainability. Has the design industry done enough?
That's a double-edged question, okay, and one that doesn't have a clear-cut answer, okay. You'd have to look at the development in, for instance, car or aviation. Have safety standards in those industries gone up? Yes. Why have they gone up? Because government legislation has stepped in and said, we need to stick to these standards. Has the government done enough for the design industry? The design and build industry globally is accounting for almost, I would say, 40% of carbon emissions. Okay? Wow. Isn't it time that the entire world comes together, governments come together and say, we need to find a better way of building. We need to build more sustainably. Okay? If that were to come into place, the ecosystem will follow. Okay? Are there startups? Are there incubators all across the world supporting these startups? Are there governments funding projects where they're looking at materials and looking at life cycle? There's so much more that needs to be done. You can't just put it on the designers or on the contractors or on one. It's the entire ecosystem that needs to develop.
Where is education coming in all this?
It's an important part. It's a very important part. But also, I think the desire to want to build better, to build more responsibly, has to be intrinsic to the designer designing, whatever it is. Okay. Unfortunately, sometimes, all across the world, this doesn't apply just to Dubai or the UAE or anywhere in the world, if there aren't standards and benchmarks that need to be adhered to, people will try to get away with the bare minimum. We, when I say we, I mean the designers, the contractors, the clients, should all be striving for the highest standards in terms of quality, in terms of sustainability, in terms of responsible build, in terms of wastage. Okay, if we are, as an industry, try to strive to the highest, I think it'll be a natural evolution towards a better way of building.
But education, you've been very active in involving students in a design competition. Why have you taken the step in involving people from education into a design? What was your primary goal to get students involved on that?
Well, because students of today are extremely bright. I look at myself many years ago when I was a student, I wasn't half as passionate, half as driven, half as concerned about the planet or things around me. I was very, very centric, just focused on what am I going to do? Okay, but these kids of today, they're aware, they're learning, they're developing, they've got opportunities. And so if we can try and give them a platform, okay, through Colab, to give them a platform to showcase their voices, to develop some of their ideas, to try and help them also connect with the right people in the ecosystem, we'd be doing them a good favor, giving them a boost, and hopefully that they're the future voices, they're the future leaders. Hopefully that will translate in the long run.
It's quite interesting. Recently, we have employed a student studying major in interior architecture to work in our Dubai branch, and the guy was in a video call together with all the stakeholders of a project, technical services from hotel company, interior designer, owner, procurement agency, and us manufacturer. And at the end of the call, I can see his face. I said, "What's wrong with you?" And he was like, "Well, this is completely different what I'm studying." You know what I mean? I said, what are you studying? Well, it sounds like it's supposed to be different, more organized, but the reality is completely the opposite. So in my little experience and a direct feedback from young black kid like that, and I feel like there is a challenge in the education. You know, I mean, maybe it's outdated, it needs to be more. So do you think it's the same when it comes to sustainability? Are the literature used in education for this, for our ecosystem, maybe need to be upgraded? You know?
Yes. So if you look at architectural interior design, just design, design in general, and also all of the programs, the university degrees, whether you call it a bachelorate or just a diploma, whatever it is, there isn't a lot of focus on materials, for starters. There isn't enough time. Okay, so they're being taught good design principles and all of those fundamentals that they need to, but there isn't really a lot of dedication on materials. As a general rule, wherever you go, whether you look at the US, you look at Europe, you look at Australia, Middle East, that's number one. That's my observation. The second thing, okay, is that, you know, from a learning perspective, it never stops. Materials are being developed in response to the environment that we live in. Okay, so where does one draw the line? You know, you're a design director, you've got to run a practice. Do you actually start thinking about where do you have the time to actually try and investigate, learn about these new materials? That's the void that we are trying to do. So yes, we want to try and educate and inspire the young designers, the future designers. And we're also trying to say, hey, we're a short, you can come for half an hour, you can learn about all of these new materials, and you can take the knowledge with you and then look at probably specifying that in your next projects.
It's quite interesting because you are an ambassador for timber. You love timber. You said, this is my favorite material. Why?
Because it's probably the oldest material we have on this planet. It is, if coming from a well-managed resource, the most sustainable. Okay, you can cut. There are advances with timber, okay, that now allow us to build buildings in timber. It's only the building codes that haven't developed to support that. Okay, there's a lot of miscommunication and misrepresentation about timber as a material, but provided it comes from a well-managed resource, it's absolutely the most sustainable material as far as I would like to believe. And also it's just a nicer space. When you're in a space with concrete and glass and marble, yes, that's nice. But when you're in a nice timber clad space, there's an element of warmth, there's an element of comfort, which I don't think you get from another material.
But there are people out there, you know, I mean, and that we need to face this, that talking about wood in general, let's say, yeah, but, you know, I mean, talking about wood, there's a lot of deforestation, people cutting trees and things like that. So there is always, you know, people like us, they are pro-sustainable material and that, and then you have another side of the coin that are against it because you say, oh, you know, because too much wood, you cut in forest and that. So what's your views on these two type of opinions?
So the people need to look at this root cause. When we talk about deforestation, the first thing we're going to look up is that CNN report which says a football field is being cut down in the Amazon every minute. Sure, but we need to understand, why are they cutting down the Amazon? They're not cutting down the forest for the wood. They're cutting down the forest to make way for the beef and the cattle industry, so they can graze these animals and they can then create the burgers and the steaks that we want to consume. So it's not the furniture or timber that's the villain there. It's these big industries, the beef, the cattle, the milk, dairy industry, that wants to graze these animals so that they can create the milk, the beef, all of that we want to consume.
So what you're highlighting is, when we go back and talk about anti-ecology, is the ignorance. That there is the ignorance about material, the ignorance about the origin of materials, and the ignorance of how material come about. You know what I mean? So there is a true, let's say, fog in the whole ecosystem. The people not understanding material, don't understand also the entire, I would say, life cycle of material.
People are very quick to jump onto the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Okay, it's easy to look at a CNN report and say, yes, it's one football field every minute. That's an easy conversation starter. It's easy for you, but I think we have a responsibility to explore, to look at that, and that, like you said, it's ignorance, but it's also the desire to go and look beyond the veil. Okay, explore just a little bit deeper.
Right. It's in one recent interview, I was amazed by the profession that inspires you. Your list starts from Elon Musk, Kengo Kuma, Zaha Hadid, Thomas Hedderwick, Tinker Hatfield, Ian Callum, and Virgil Abloh. What all these people have in common that you admire?
I think they all try to break boundaries and barriers. I think we need to question the status quo. Okay, far too many people are willing to just accept, this is the way things are, this is the way it was, this is the way it will be. I'm not a fan of that. If we can be better, if we can do better, if we can find a more efficient way, a more sustainable way, a more responsible way, we should be striving and pushing towards that. I also think some of these icons, for me particularly, Tinker Hatfield is an architect, but he turned to be one of the greatest sneaker designers. Okay, you look at Elon Musk, he revolutionized the automotive industry. So they were outsiders who came and changed the way things were. And I sometimes feel, yes, they're brilliant, they're extremely intelligent, extremely driven, and just amazing. Okay, but sometimes a fresh pair of eyes on a problem could provide a solution. Okay, because sometimes when you're just looking at the same problem from within the industry and you've been looking at it, you can have a very myopic view of that problem. But if you have an outsider, someone who's not from the industry, who's looking at it outside looking in, he might have a completely different perspective.
So is it fair to say that Colab is the Tesla of material world?
I wish we could become as big as Tesla. More importantly, actually, I wish we have as big an impact or a legacy as Tesla. So if we're able to inspire designers to specify responsibly, specify understanding the materials, and really use the materials for what they are, for their purpose that they're designed for, that will be amazing.
So, Rich, as I mentioned in introductions, you are the center of the material world. You are an advisor to many interior designers, and you know exactly what it takes. So what are the latest trends that you see for interior designer to win big jobs?
So we see two things. We see designers looking for innovative, sustainable materials that are locally available. We do see designers also looking for materials that aren't widely specified. So they're looking for an edge. They're looking to break away from the mold of what's been done and dusted. Okay, Dubai is, yes, a young city, okay, but design here is fast, it's moving, it's changing, and design is not just looking at what's hot here, they're looking at what's hot all across the world. So some of the key words that I would say, they're looking at circular design, they're looking at sustainable materials, they're looking at recycled, upcycled, they're looking at materials that have minimum wastage. Okay, so these are some of the things that they're looking at. I mean, I'll give you an example. Okay, we get designers all the time coming in looking for particular materials. We had a designer, I'm not going to name her, but her firm wins a lot of projects, very well established, and they came in looking for a slightly different, they came in looking for an accent material. They took a few samples from us, they blended it perfectly into this mood board, and a couple of weeks later, I get a very nice thank you note from them saying, thank you very much for your material inspiration. We won the project as a result. And to me, I think that's a dual win because A, you had a material that was never specified in the region, now being specified. So the proof is in the pudding. Okay, and B, the designer got to work with something new. They got to expand their material palette. And that's exactly what we want to try and do.
So in your lovely Dubai, if top of Burj Khalifa, I put a massive white board, what would be the message that you write on it?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Never stop learning. I think that's at the core of what we do, of who we are. Okay, because if you close your mind to the fact that I can't learn from the janitor, from the bank clerk, from the taxi driver, from the waiter, from anyone, from the CEO of a company, we should be willing to accept that we can learn from them. We should be willing to accept their viewpoints, not necessarily agree, okay? But if we can take away from each and every single interaction we have, that makes us richer, more wiser people.
Next time one of the clients don't give us the material control sample, I would say, if you don't believe me that I need those ones, go and speak to Rick at Colab in Detroit. Dear Rick, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.